head to fix a relay of hosses to Elkhead because I made up my mind I was going to make Dan Barry chase me out of that town. I walked into the saloon where Dan was sitting, braiding a little horsehair strand. My God, Kate, think of him sitting there doing that with 100 fellows standing about waiting for him to kill or be killed. I went up to him. I picked a fight, and then I slapped him in the face." The sweat started on Daniels' forehead at the thought. "But you're still alive!" cried Kate Cumberland. "Had you handled his gun first?" "No. As soon as I hit him I turned my back to him and took a couple of steps away from him." "Oh, Buck, Buck!" she cried, her face lighting. "You knew he wouldn't shoot you in the back?" "I didn't know nothing. I couldn't even think, and my body was numb as a dead man's all below the hips. There I stood like I was chained to the floor. You know how it is in a nightmare when something chases you and you can't run. That was the way with me." "Buck, and he was sitting behind you while you stood there?" "Aye, sitting there with my death sitting on his trigger finger. But I knowed that if I showed the white feather, if I let him see me shake, he'd be out of his chair and on top of me. No, gun, he don't need nothing but his hands. And what was in front of my eyes was a death like Jim Silent's." He squinted his eyes closed and groaned. Once more he roused himself. "But I couldn't move a foot without my knees buckling, so I takes out my makin's and rolls a cigarette. And while I was doing it I was praying that my strength would come back to me before he come back to himself and started." "It was surprise that held him, Buck. To think of you striking him, you who have saved his life and fought for him like a blood brother. Oh, Buck, of all the men in the world you're the bravest and the noblest." "There ain't nothin' in that brand of talk," growled Buck, reddening. "Anyway, at last I started for the door. It wasn't farther away than from here to that wall. Outside was my hoss and a chance for livin', but that door was 1,000 years away, and 1,000 times while I walked towards it I felt Dan's gun click and bang behind me and felt the lead go tearin' through me, and I didn't dare to hurry because I knew that might wake Dan up. So finally I got to the doors, and just as they were swinging to behind me I heard a sort of moan behind me." "From Dan?" whispered the white faced girl. "I know. A sort of a stifled cry when he's angered. Oh, Buck!" "My first step took me 10 yards from that door," reminisced Buck Daniels, "and my next step landed me in the saddle, and I dug them spurs clean into the insides of Long Bess. She started like a watch spring uncoilin', and as she spurts down the streets I leans clean over to her mane and looks back, and there I seen Dan standin' in the door with his gun in his hand and the wind blowin' his hair. But he didn't shoot because the next second I was swallowed up in the dark and couldn't see him no more." "But it was no use," cried the girl. "With Black Bart to trail you and with Satan to carry him, he overtook you, and then—" "He didn't," said Buck Daniels. "I fixed things so he couldn't get started with Satan for some time, and before he could have Satan on my trail I'd put a long stretch behind me because Long Bess was racing every step. The lay of the land was with me. It was pretty level, and on level going Long Bess is almost as fast as Satan, but on rocky going Satan is like a goat. Nothing stops him. And I was riding Long Bess like to bust her heart, straight towards McCauley's. We wasn't more'n a mile away when I thought the wind was behind me, you see that I heard a sort of far off whistling down the wind. My God!" He could not go on for a moment, and Kate Cumberland sat with parted lips, twisting her fingers together and then tearing them apart once more. "Well, that mile was the worst in my life. I thought maybe the man I'd sent on ahead hadn't been able to leave me a relay at McCauley's, and if he hadn't I knew I'd die somewhere in the hills beyond. And they looked as black as dead men, and all sort of grinning down at me. But when I got to McCauley's there stood a hoss right in front of the house. It didn't take me 2 seconds to make the saddle change, and then I was off again." A sigh of relief came from Byrne and Kate. "That hoss was a beauty. Not long legged like Bess, nor half so fast, but he was just right for the hills. Climbed like a goat and didn't let up. Up, up we goes. The wind blows the clouds away when we get to the top of the climb, and I looks down into the valley all white in the moonlight. And across the valley I seen two little shadows sliding smooth and steady. It was Dan and Satan and Black Bart. Buck, my heart, it stood plumb still. I gives my hoss the spurs and we went down the next slope, and I don't remember nothing except that we got to the Circle K bar after a million years, most, and when we got there the piebald flops on the ground, near dead. But I made the change and started off again, and that next hoss was even better than the piebald, a sure goer. When he started I could tell by his gait what he was, and I looked up at the sky." He stopped, embarrassed. "And thanked God, Buck?" "Kate, I ain't ashamed if maybe I did. But since then I ain't seen or heard Dan. But all the time I rode I was expecting to hear his whistle behind me, close up." All the life died from her face. "No, Buck. If he'd of followed all the way he would have caught you in spite of your relay. No, I understand what happened. After a while he remembered that Mac Strann was waiting for him back in Brownsville, and he left your trail to be taken up later and went back to Brownsville." "You didn't see him follow you after you left the Circle X bar?" "No, I didn't dare look back, but somehow I knew he was coming." She shook her head. "He won't come, Buck. He'll go back to meet Mac Strann, and then—" She ran to the chair of Buck swiftly and caught his hands. "What sort of man is Mac Strann?" Buck smiled strangely up into her face. "Does it make any difference," he said, "to Dan?" She went slowly back to her place. "No," she admitted, "no difference." "If you came by relays for 24 hours," said the doctor, numbering his points upon accurate finger tips, "it is humanly impossible that this man could have followed you very closely. It will probably take him another day to arrive." But here his glance fell upon old Joe Cumberland, and found the cattleman smiling faintly to himself. Buck Daniels was considering the last remark seriously. "No," he said, "it ain't possible. Besides, what Kate says may be true. She ought to know. She says he'll wait for Mac Strann. I didn't think of that. I thought I was saving Dan from another—well, what a damn fool I've been." He unknotted his bandana and with it mopped his face to a semblance of cleanliness. "It was riding that done it," he explained, shamefaced. "You put a man on a hoss for a certain time, and after a while he gets so he can't think. He's sort of nutty. That was the way with me when I come in." "Open the window on the veranda," said Joe Cumberland. "I want to feel the wind." The doctor obeyed the instruction, and again he noted the same quiet, contented smile on the lips of the old man. For some reason it made him ill at ease to see it. "He won't get here for 8 or 10 hours," went on Buck Daniels, easing himself into a more comfortable position and raising his head a little higher. "10 hours more. Even if he does come, that'll give me a chance to rest up. Right now I'm kind of shaky." "A condition, you will observe, in which Mr. Barry will also be when he arrives," remarked the doctor. "Shaky?" grinned Buck Daniels. "My friend, you don't know that bird." He sat up, clenching his fist. "And if Dan does come, he can't afford to press me too far. I'll take so much, and then—" He struck his fist on the arm of the chair. "Buck," cried Kate Cumberland, "are you mad? Have you lost your reason? Would you face him?" Buck Daniels winced, but then he shook his head doggedly. "He had his chance down in Brownsville," he said, "and he didn't take it. Why? Because my back was turned. Well, he could of got in front of me if he had been terrible anxious. I've seen Dan in action, and he's seen me in action. Maybe he's seen too much. There's been stranger things than that in this world." He hitched his belt so that the butt of his revolver came farther forward. But now Kate Cumberland advised: "Buck, you're tired out. You don't know what you're saying. Better go up to bed." He flushed a ruddy bronze. "D'you think I'm just talking words, Kate, to hear myself talk?" "Listen," broke in Joe Cumberland, and raised a bony forefinger for silence. And the doctor noted a great change in the old man. There was no longer a tremor in his body. There was only a calm and smiling expectation, a certainty. A tinge of colour was in his withered face for the first time since Byrne had come to the ranch, And now the cattleman raised his finger with such an air of calm authority